How do you get a good guitar tone is a question every guitarist has asked themselves at one stage. But there are a few caveats to this question that often get overlooked, and once you understand them, you'll find tone creation is far simpler than you may have realized. The first and arguably most important thing to understand is that a good tone is incredibly subjective. Everyone has their own likes and dislikes, so what may sound great to me might sound horrible to you. Instead of thinking of tone as good or bad, ask yourself, does this fit the sound of the song? Take the composition you're working on into context and decide what would make the most sense for that sound or style. Say you have a fairly polished pop rock song. Would you want something cleaner and sparkly for the lead, or something closer to a Metallica record? Of course, there will still be some subjectivity here. I've no doubt there'll be comments saying they prefer the second tone over the first, but the point is to take into account the actual sound you or the band you're working with is aiming for. And in this instance, it wasn't to sound like a metal band. Once you know what you're aiming for, use the rest of the mix to guide your tone choices. It's hard to dial in a great tone if you don't already have a sound in mind before you start. The biggest mistake I see people make is creating their tone in isolation. While that might make sense as it's easier to hear every change you make when tweaking settings, the problem is you've no idea how it will sound once it's placed in the context of your bass, drums, vocals, and so on. Instead, I'd recommend refining your guitar tone once you had the basic tracks in place. That doesn't mean you can't start tracking guitars first. You can use a stock tone for now, then go back and fine-tune things once you've got other tracks that help guide your decisions. In this case, I've already tracked the bass and drums and recorded the guitar DI. Now I can cycle through a few presets until I find something that feels like it fits with everything else going on. Once you find something you like, you can then solo it and start fine-tuning. The key is to listen in context first, so you don't waste hours endlessly tweaking settings, only to realize it falls flat the moment you hear it alongside the rest of the mix. Another common complaint I hear from people struggling with this is that they can't ever come up with anything that sounds close to their favorite records. Using songs you love as references is a great habit to build, but the downside is that you're often comparing your isolated guitar to an entire mix, which is really an unfair comparison. So much of what you perceive as guitar tone actually comes from other elements in the mix and arrangement. You're hearing the bass at the same time, which heavily influences how the guitars are perceived. And the guitars themselves are often doubled or quad-tracked. Add to this the many other factors shaping the final sound, and it becomes clear why it's really an apples to oranges comparison. For instance, this guitar tone might sound pretty distorted and heavy. Yet, once I remove the bass, it loses a lot of that perceived gain and thickness. It's worth listening to the isolated tracks from your favourite songs when you can find them. They give you a real insight into how the best tone is simply the one that fits the song. One of my favourite examples of this is the bass and guitars from System of a Down's Chop Suey. When you hear them on their own, they sound pretty bad, arguably, especially the bass. But in the full context of the mix, everything sounds perfect for what the song needs to be. Another reason you might be unhappy with your tone could actually come down to the chords you play, not to the tone you're putting them through. If you'd like to find out why, watch this video next.